Employers, what is the most disturbing thing you've discovered performing a background check on candidates? Story 1. We did a background check on a guy who it turns out had sued every former employer for an on-the-job injury, usually right after 90 days when most trial periods end. I did not hire him, but somebody else did, and I warned them that the background check showed at the 90-day mark he would try and get injured on the job and sue them. They took that to heart, and on the 92nd day he showed up to work with a lawyer claiming that his office chair had hurt his back, that the lights above his cubicle were giving him migraines, and his monitor was making his eyes hurt. The company responded, prepared with their own lawyers, gave him an ergonomic keyboard, a monitor filter, and a special little area where the lights were better. And an ergonomic chair. And then they made it known that they would be contacting his former employers, many of whom he had sued, saying he was unable to work anymore. He stopped complaining and was let go in the next round of layoffs. Look, if you know me, you know I'm all for sticking it to crappy employers who take advantage of workers, but if you go in there with the sole intent of trying to scam an employer like this, well, this guy got what was coming to him. Story 2. Mandatory, not me, but my mom. She used to work for Corrections Canada, going over the meal plans and also helping inmates learn cooking skills while in prison to help them potentially get a job when they are released. She normally doesn't look at what the inmate had done to end up in prison, but one guy's letter made her curious. He was applying to get into some cooking classes and mentioned in his letter quite a few times about how he's a great and hard worker, aside from his family problems. So she got curious and Googled him. Yeah. Dude killed his wife and daughters. Family problems. Story 3. My wife interviewed a candidate for a manufacturing job. She proceeded with the background check, and the FBI showed up within 20 minutes of her search. Wanted her to pretend to hire him and have the dude come in so they could arrest him. She said, No. I do background checks so we don't have a shootout in the parking lot. The FBI arrested that guy that afternoon at the address he put on his application. The FBI could not tell my wife what the guy did, only that he was extremely dangerous and wanted under a closed/eyes-only file. Story 4. I did a background check for one guy, and I found out that he had lied about every single job that he had. Going one job back, he claimed he was a manager at a shoe store that went out of business. I was unable to verify that because the shoe store went out of business. Then he said that he was in the military for 4 years as a communication specialist. I found that he was in the Army for 3 months but got an honorable discharge because he couldn't make it through boot camp. He claimed before that he was the manager of the evening shift at a chicken plant. Turns out that he was a janitor for only a few months because he was fired for job performance. He claimed he was a manager of a hotel before that, and it turned out that his mother was actually the night manager and she was fired because she kept bringing her kid to work. I tried to do the math and realized that if everything in the background check was true, that the applicant probably also lied about his age and had to be a lot younger than he claimed to be. He said he was in his late 20s, but I bet he was no older than 20 or 21. Story 6. In order from least crazy to most, 1. Candidate is open about having prior arrests for minor thefts some years ago. We get it. Some people make mistakes. We can overlook old stuff. Candidate arrives at the interview and signs a consent form for background check, which we run during interviews. Right after the candidate leaves, the results come back and we learned they were arrested 2 months prior for grand theft and have a theft-related charge roughly twice per year for the last 10 years. Didn't hire. 2. Candidate calls before scheduled time and says they will be late as they are having car troubles. Okay, I have an open slot later in the day and I move them there. Interview time comes and goes without further contact, so I assume they're not going to show. As I go to leave that afternoon, the receptionist stops me and asks, "Hey, was first name, last name going to interview today?" "Yeah, why?" "They were just arrested for stealing a car with a toddler in it." Apparently, the candidate was going to steal a car to get to the interview. 3. Additional info. We only run a statewide check initially, and after 30 days, we run the national level check. So this candidate shows up, great interview, clean record, in-state, etc. We hire them, they complete training, and are doing a great job overall. After 30 days, we run the national background check and get 3 national hits, all for active warrants for murder/manslaughter. Frick. We call the police, the employee never showed up again, and we never heard anything else. Okay, I have no idea how those state and national checks are done and organized, but how can there be a national warrant for someone who is a murderer, but the state doesn't have access to that information? Just because it didn't happen in that state, the state's like, hey, none of our business, he's clean. I'm sure there must be a reason, but I'll be damned if I can think of one. Story 7. I called an applicant's reference and his former employer said, I'm not allowed to comment on former employee performance. I can only confirm their start and end dates. But why don't you ask me about the weather? I said, okay, how is the weather there? He replied, the clouds are moving lazily across the sky and they are really dumb. I found out later that he stole this from a Dilbert cartoon, but he really did say it. Story 8. Used to work in banking. Every employee was background checked, state and federal, and had their credit bureau reports run as well. We were never allowed to bring anyone on until all of their background check had been approved, and that always took a minimum of 3 business days, sometimes as long as a week. One of the branches I was responsible for at the time broke the rule and hired a new teller and allowed him to start right away. They were extremely understaffed and had been for a while. He'd been there for a couple days, no problems. It was just after closing on a Friday when I got a call from HR. The new teller was a do not hire for felony. Crap. Out of curiosity, I asked what he was convicted of. Multiple R. I called the branch manager, the one who hired him, and she got very quiet and whispered to me that she broke the rules, let him start working already, that he was there right now helping her close the branch, and they were the only 2 people there. Bear in mind, the manager was a very attractive, petite, maybe 110-pound woman in her late 20s. The teller, I later learned, was about the same age and built like a pro linebacker. She was terrified. So she stayed on the phone with me while I called corporate security on the other line. They got there very quickly, escorted her to her car, and him out the door. No idea what happened to him, but I had to write her up, and senior management was seriously mad. Yeah, sorry. I mean, even if our current prison systems were any good at actual rehabilitation, that person should not be left alone with someone like that. I'm glad the manager was okay and nothing happened, but sometimes those background checks are there for a reason. Story 9. Content warning. Child abuse/neglect. Scroll forward 1 minute 8 seconds to skip this story. When we were hiring contractors, I would Google their names and phone numbers to see what I could find on them. One of the guys that applied was recently in jail for a few years for endangering the welfare of a child. The article stated that the police showed up at the home of him and his girlfriend to serve a warrant. Upon entering the home, they saw that the entire place was swimming with raw sewage. There were dirty needles scattered everywhere. When they checked the back bedroom, they found 2 naked toddlers on moldy mattresses that were surrounded by raw sewage. It made me physically ill to read. Needless to say, we did not hire him. I also found a dong pic he posted with his phone number saying, "Text me for more pics." Holy crap. I hope he got help and bettered himself and was able to rehabilitate. It sounds like drug use really put this person on a bad path, and putting toddlers in an environment like that, there is just a ton of work to make up for that in your life. And frankly, I think he's kind of forfeit any right to be a part of their life. But because it sounds like drugs were involved, I really do hope he learned from those mistakes. Story 10. Guy had a felony assault charge. Not disturbing in itself, but found out later it was from beating his previous boss's face after being confronted about coming in late for work repeatedly. The boss survived, but apparently had to have his face reconstructed. So yeah, hard pass on that one. Hope you told him nope over the phone. Story 11. His profile picture on Facebook was an upside-down male genitalia. I assume it was his. Using the dong as a nose, he had cleverly balanced a pair of eyeglasses over the genitals and drawn pupils on the testicles to create the image of a gentleman/elephant wearing a pair of glasses. He got an interview, got the job, and developed into one of my best technical analysts. Story 12. Applicant drug test. Tested not of human origin. Some people get their dog to pee for them. And positive for TCH. Mary, you know what. First off, don't give your dogs pot, please. They could panic, and frankly, you don't know doses for them, and just don't. They can't consent, so don't. And second, OP, it's THC, not TCH. You sound like a real narc. I'm kidding. I bet you're fine. Story 13. I used to work for a company that ran CV, background checks, credit checks for financial firms. These are some of the more interesting happenings. The phone number for a woman's previous employer was not for an office like she claimed, but rather a mental hospital in her home country. A man with an undisclosed directorship and business bankruptcy. Not good, as he was applying for a very senior role. A woman who was fired from more than one job for turning up drunk. Story 14. I interviewed a bunch of CS/CIS college seniors to become software development interns at a company I was a software development manager at. The plan was to hire interns for 20-ish hours a week, judge how good their skill was, and hire some, most, all of them when they graduated in about 4 to 5 months. I ended up hiring 8 interns, of which 5 or 6 we ended up converting to full-time after graduation. One guy I interviewed was older than the rest, about 26 when the rest were 21 to 23. He was super personable and did reasonably well on my development skills test. He sold himself really well, and I was very enthusiastic about the interview and planned to offer him one of the positions. He pulled me aside after the interview and said he wanted to tell me something. It turns out he had spent 3 years in jail for dealing drugs. He further explained that he had been doing community service and court-mandated counseling for over 2 years and produced from his backpack a literal mountain of paperwork proving it. I told him I would consult HR. HR actually said they were fine with it. Still not sure how this happened. I brought the guy on, and holy crap, did he want to prove himself. He kicked all kinds of butt every moment he was there. While he wasn't the most skilled of the interns we brought on, he was probably third in talent. He spent every waking moment learning, listening, and getting better as a developer. We converted him to employee the moment he graduated, and for the next year until the office closed down, project ended, that dude probably averaged 80 hours a week. He's now been working as a dev in a small startup for about 5 years. I still keep in touch. Great dude who just made a series of stupid mistakes when he was young. Hell yes! While we've read some stories where people did some really gnarly stuff in their past that I think, at the very least, the path to rehabilitation would need to be far more gradual and monitored, stories like this are great to hear. If someone made a mistake in their past, it isn't necessarily an indicator of what they will be like as an employee. Obviously, I've got a lot of thoughts on rehabilitation that require a lot more discussion and nuance than we're ever going to get from one of my patented Mr. Facts comments, but still, I like this story a lot. Story 15. Content warning. Child neglect/death. Scroll forward 1 minute, 23 seconds to skip this story. I was working at a family fund center as the accountant. I did all the payroll and was listed as the contact person with the state for any employee questions. I got a call that went something like this. Ted. Hi, my name is Ted, and I'm calling to see if you employ Sally? Me. Yes, she just started here last week. T. I'm Sally's parole officer. I wanted to check and see if she will be dealing with any children at her work. Me. Yes, this is a family fun center that is full of kids. Is there a problem? T. Yeah, you need to send her home right now. She is not allowed to work anywhere with kids. Did you do a background check on her? Me. I'll check with HR, but we normally do run a background check. T. I will contact her, but please send her home and do not let her return. Me. Okay, thank you. End of convo. I do a quick Google search and pull up her police records. Turned out she and her boyfriend had a kid together, but were both addicted to drugs. To get the baby to stop crying, they would put a bag over the baby's head and make it pass out. One night they left it over the baby's head too long and it stopped breathing. She did a few years in jail and had just recently been paroled. I lost it on our HR person because I found out he had stopped submitting background checks to the company we used even though we were still paying them the monthly fee. We hired a baby killer to work with kids at a family fun center. Story 16. Guy applied for a driver position with one of our senior care affiliates. Take elderly people on errands and to appointments, deliver meals, take clients to the center where they can hang out, etc. Not 1, not 2, but 10 counts of elder abuse with a side of attempted murder and theft. Rescinded that offer real dang quick. Story 17. Man applying for a job as a construction estimator. He owns a construction company and was convicted of defrauding various city and county governments. Pretty much the last person you'd want doing estimates. Story 18. I was part of a group interview for a director position. Guy was cool, definitely qualified, and was breezing through the interview. Pretty funny, too. I thought for sure he was in. We get to the end, and HR is telling me about the process after if they were to offer him the position, and once I mention the background check, he quickly responds that he wouldn't pass it. We all sit there in silence for a second, and he calmly says that he was charged with 3 counts of felony armed robbery, so likely wouldn't pass. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.